Happy to be joined now by George Stoia the third, SoonerScoop.com. George has made his way back from Dallas, Oklahoma, victorious in the Red River rivalry. And I'm curious, George, you saw Baker Mayfield on the field after the game. What did he think of Dylan Gabriel?
He said he was gutsy, and it's so interesting hearing that from Baker, right? We saw that throughout his career at Oklahoma. He was a guy that always came up in the clutch moments, those 3 seasons that he was the quarterback for OU. You think back to his OU Texas game in 2017, the game-winning touchdown pass to Mark Andrews. So for him to be like, man, he had some guts. That final drive, I think he said, to see the poise, the calm, the collectedness of him to go down in that environment when the stadium was as loud as it could be was truly something special. So it was awesome to catch up with Baker. The video of Baker in the end zone, he was right there where Nick Anderson caught the game winner, and he's losing his mind. So it was really cool. Baker actually spoke to Dylan. He called him the night before the game and said, hey, do whatever it takes to win this game. Obviously, Dylan went out and played, arguably the best game of his career in terms of given the situation and everything that went into it. So awesome to hear Baker's perspective on Dylan.
What was the mood like in the stadium when Oklahoma came out for that last drive? Texas has just kicked a field goal. It feels like Texas has the momentum at that point, but it didn't look like anybody on Oklahoma's sideline was phased on the TV. But how did it look in person?
Yeah, I think that you're right on the sideline. I think that the players definitely thought they had a chance to go down and at least kick a field goal and send the thing to overtime. But I would say among the fans and even the media, it was like, man, they played such a good football game. It just slipped away in the fourth quarter. Texas, I thought, played really well. I mean, I was really impressed by Texas on Saturday, but it felt like, man, this is just going to be a really tough, heartbreaking loss for Oklahoma because at that point, Oklahoma hadn't been able to move the ball very well, and Dylan hadn't been able to connect with his receivers down the field really since early in the third quarter on that touchdown drive right out of the half. So I think a lot of people thought, man, it's going to be really tough. Zach Schmidt had just, missed a 45-yarder, in which he was not even close. I mean, he wasn't even close on the length. It was short. So I think there was not a lot of faith that they were going to be able to move the ball. But then all of a sudden, you get 2 chunk plays. You're across the 50. Then you get the big one where Dylan steps up, scrambles a bit, and finds Drake Stoops. And all of a sudden, you're thinking, okay, they could win this thing right here. You get the PI call that puts the ball at the 6, and then Dylan finds Nick Anderson. I mean, just like that, it was phenomenal. I mean, it was something that it's cliche to say, but it's I think it was Andrew Rame, the starting center, that said, "Hey, it's like something out of a movie," and it really was. I mean, it was incredible.
Well, you think about that throw to Stoops that set up the touchdown pass. Like that's reaching across eras of OU football. Essentially, you've got the transfer who came in like the day Caleb Williams left. Jeff Levy called Dylan Gabriel, who was about to start class at UCLA, throwing to the 9 millionth year senior son of Bob Stoops.
I all I could think about too during that play is, man, Texas fans have got to be tired of the last name Stoops, right? I mean, he's just been a killer. You think back to even the comeback game, he was big in that game. I think he caught a 2-point conversion to tie the game in 2021. In 2020, he caught the game-winning touchdown pass in the 4 overtime game. So it's been a remarkable stretch for Drake Stoops. But you're right. I mean, and I think it was also, Andy, just a culmination of what Brent has built. I mean, you had guys that were returning players that played in that game a year ago, knew what it felt like to lose 49-0. And then you had a bunch of newcomers that were making big plays that didn't play in that game, have never been in that environment. Even Dylan Gabriel, I mean, he didn't play, obviously, in the game a year ago. For him to, his first time in that sort of environment, play the way he did, it was just a really, truly special performance.
What did that 49 med ball sit-ups?
Yeah.
For all those workouts because of 49-0. Jerry Schmidt reminding them pretty much every day of what happened last year. But for Brent Venables, this has to be vindication in terms of he is the right guy to coach this program. Because I was one of the people who, after that game last year, was like, okay, I get he's a first-year head coach, but how do you not have a backup quarterback ready? Are you sure this job isn't too big? And now you look at it and you say, okay, yeah, no, he's got it.
And he, after the game on Saturday, he talked about the game last year and said it was a complete embarrassment and his hands were all over it. And this year, I think the word he used was proud. And I think you look at what he's done. I think he did a lot of self-reflection, Andy. You look at the guys that they went and got in the portal. I mean, they didn't have those type of players. You look at the players they recruited, the game management. I thought the game management, that's something here in Norman that was very critical of Brent a year ago. He wasn't calling timeouts when he was supposed to. He wasn't handling the end of games in which they played a lot of close games a year ago. He wasn't handling those situations right. He handled all that stuff the right way on Saturday. And I think that that was part of the validation of, hey, OU does have the right guy. And look what he's been able to do in just 1 year, flipping this roster upside down and also developing the guys that did stick with the program. And you can tell, Andy, there's just buy-in from this group. And I think we've always known that. It's just, can they get the results on the field? That's been the question. Is everybody says the right things in this program. But can they win the big one? Can they take the next step? And they did on Saturday.
When you came on last week, you were talking about the talent upgrades that Oklahoma had made on the defense. Let's talk specifically about the defensive line, because that group was outstanding on Saturday. They were all over Quinn Ewers. And, if you'd said going into the game, who's going to have more sacks, the Texas D-line or the Oklahoma D-line, I think most people, even including Oklahoma fans, would have said, yeah, probably going to be the Texas D-line. That was not the case at all.
No, and it was guys like Dejon Terry, who they get from Tennessee, who, that was maybe their biggest get in the portal in terms of a guy that played, from Tennessee, played in the SEC, was very productive there. All of a sudden, we hadn't seen a whole lot of him in the first 5 games. At least he wasn't super productive. He gets a big sack in the game, right? I mean, he had a huge game, was a monster in the run game as well. Jacob Lacey from Notre Dame, who they didn't even know if he was going to play this season because he had blood clots before the season. He comes in and gets the big sack down there right before the field goal. And if he doesn't get that sack, Texas might just run out the clock and be able to kick a field goal with no time left. So you're talking about guys up front that are making plays that weren't on this team. PJ Adebawore, at the end, the Hail Mary, he's in there. He's the one that gets the pressure on Quinn Ewers and maybe makes him throw it a little earlier than he wanted to. And so, again, there's guys that are making plays that weren't on this team. And then even a guy like Ethan Downs, another guy that stuck with the program, had a really tough year last year. I mean, he was somebody that faced a lot of criticism from the fan base. He comes up with 2 massive sacks in the game. He's been arguably their best defensive end this entire season. So that defensive line has been really good so far through 6 games. And I think there's a lot of hope that they can get even better.
Well, the goal line stand, I think, was another really key moment in that game where Texas had 4 cracks at it from the 1-yard line. They bring in their defensive linemen to be fullbacks, and they get stuffed multiple times. I doubt Oklahoma fans were watching the USC game when they didn't finish off their goal line stand. No, USC did still win, but they did have a goal line situation where they did stop them 3 times, but did not stop them a 4th time. I think back to those days right after Lincoln Riley left. How are Oklahoma fans feeling right now? Because that's the thing that they've been dealing with psychologically, is this guy left, but we think we're an elite program and one of the country's best. Why would you leave for somebody else when you're already somewhere elite? Does what happened yesterday kind of validate those feelings?
I think they feel vindicated for sure. I mean, I think that last year was so tough on them. You think back to the national media and the national narrative. Was Brent Venables a bad hire? And I think there's a lot of fans wondering that too. And there wasn't an identity for this football team, right? I mean, when you hire a guy like Brent Venables, you're supposed to be built on defense, and they weren't a year ago. They were really bad on defense. And in fact, they were worse in a lot of areas than they were under Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley. So I think that the vindication is what they feel right now, and they have an identity. And Oklahoma, for a long time, has been built on great defense, going back to the 70s with the Selman brothers, the 80s with the Boz, early 2000s, Rocky Kalmus, Teddy Lehman, the great linebackers that played for Brent Venables before he left for Clemson. So to have that identity back where you can have a goal line stand, and there's a lot of people that felt like they could make those plays, is something that Oklahoma hasn't seen in over a decade. And so I think that that's where Oklahoma fans feel really good about this thing moving forward is, hey, we're built on a great defense and they're scoring. Like, look, is this as good as the Lincoln Riley offenses? No, but it's still a top 10 offense in the country. They can put up a lot of points. and they've got a lot of weapons. And so I think people are feeling really good about the direction. And again, the buy-in of the program and the way this thing is being built. It just got accelerated a lot over the weekend, Andy.
Well, and one thing that impressed me about the offense was, you go back to the Cincinnati game, it didn't feel like they could finish drives in that game. They did that when they had to against Texas, which it's a tougher opponent. It's better players, yet they rose to the occasion. And I think that was a pretty critical moment. But Dylan Gabriel using his legs as effectively as he did really felt like it opened things up, because some of those times where guys were covered and somebody else is getting sacked, he's turning those into positive plays. It feels like that becomes its own kind of cheat code.
They were 6 for 6 in the red zone on Saturday, and a large part of that was Dylan being able to make some plays with his legs. I mean, you even think back to the first touchdown. I think they ran maybe 5 QB draws. The first one of the game goes for a 10-yard touchdown run. Dylan was really effective in that area, and even getting out of the pocket and making some throws down the field. So, I think it's something that we're going to continue to see moving forward with Dylan. Obviously, last year, they weren't able to do those things because they knew if Dylan went down, they had nobody. And so this year, if Dylan goes down, obviously you have 5-star Jackson Arnold, and I'm sure that they don't want to play him just yet, but you would feel comfortable with him coming into the game given his talent. But yeah, I mean, Dylan's a guy that, he was recruited originally by Army. I mean, he was supposed to be an option quarterback coming out of high school. So this is a guy that can definitely run. Is he going to beat you in an 80-yard dash down the field? Probably not, like Caleb Williams, but he is a guy that can accelerate. He sees the field really well in terms of things opening up and when to take off. And it feels like they kind of, Andy, waited till the Texas game to really unleash that. It was almost like it was a whole part of the game plan coming in. I mean, they did some other stuff too, some direct snaps to Jalil Farouk, who's been a big-time playmaker for him. So Jeff Lebby really unleashed the clip on Saturday and kind of pulled everything out of his bag. And I thought he called a really, really good game, and he had a great game plan in terms of letting Gabriel use his legs.
So I realize the team is going to be thinking about West Virginia and Kansas and TCU and the teams they still have to beat. How hard is it for everybody else to not look ahead to seeing Texas again? Because it's interesting because like Washington and Oregon are playing this weekend in a game where they might be the two best teams in their conference, but it feels like the loser might not get back to that conference championship game. In the Big 12, it still feels like Texas has a very, very good chance of seeing Oklahoma in Jerry World.
It was a big topic of discussion for us after the game. It was already, what do you think the line would be if they played next Saturday? I still think Texas might be favored if they played again. It might be obviously a closer line, maybe a pick'em game, but I think that's already on the minds of a lot of people here. I mean, it was clear to me those were two really good football teams. I thought Texas played really well. Quinn Ewers was really good. Other than the 2 interceptions early in the game, he finishes 31 of 37, over 300, yards. He was really solid in that game. I think Texas has a lot of playmakers. I think their defense had somewhat of a bad day. But I think these are very clearly the two best teams. You look at the Big 12 right now, and it seems like there's just a lot of 6-6, 7-5 type teams. And one of those teams can sneak up and beat you and surprise you one weekend. But if Oklahoma takes care of business, I think everyone, and that's the thing about Sarkisian after the game. I thought that the way that they handled that press conference, they are already looking forward. They weren't sulking in the loss, it felt like. And I think that they're going to get back on track too. So it does feel like a collision course, which is it's only right, Andy? Yeah. Last year in the Big 12, Brett Yormark has to give one of those teams the Big 12 championship trophy. I mean, it would just be gold. So
I just let Greg Sankey hand it to one of them.
Who knows? He might show up to the game. I mean, he was at the game on Saturday. I think he ended up leaving at halftime to head down to College Station for the Texas A&M Alabama game. But he was there. And again, it's very fitting that the last year, it does look like it's going to be a collision course between Oklahoma and Texas.
Round 1 done. Round 2 on the way. George Stoia III, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On 3 Sports YouTube channel.